In a recent interview on the Drill Down podcast, Seamus Bruner, director of research at the Government Accountability Institute, highlighted bipartisan frustration over members of Congress allegedly using their positions for financial personal gain. Bruner emphasized that the American public is increasingly disillusioned with lawmakers who appear to prioritize personal enrichment over public service, pointing to instances where congressional members have reportedly benefited from insider information and favorable legislation. He called for greater transparency and stricter regulations to prevent conflicts of interest and restore trust in government institutions. Joining us now is Eric Eggers, co-host of The Drill Down.
Hey, it's great to be with you.
Great to have you. So outrage over congressional self-enrichment seems to transcend party lines. What specific examples come to mind for you that illustrate this bipartisan issue and how it has affected public trust in our legislative bodies, Eric?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is an issue that we at the Government Accountability Institute have been covering for some time. We actually were founded after our president, Peter Schweitzer, wrote a book called Throw Them All Out, which exposed how members of Congress were beating the market by greater percentages than hedge fund professionals. And, the conclusion is either they're really smart or they've got access to information that nobody else does. And I think the obvious answer is the latter. The outrage over that actually prompted immediate action by Congress. They passed something called the Stock Act. And only a couple years later, in the middle of the night, they gutted it, and Congress is back up to their old tricks. I know that a member of Congress and current gubernatorial candidate in New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill, recently made some news because she's seen an explosion in her net worth, and she did option trading or stock trading that was a violation of some rules, and she paid, I think, a $400 fine for $350,000 worth of trades. I know we actually had Chip Roy, a member of Congress, on our podcast this week, and I know he's efforting to ban members of Congress from being able to own, buy, or sell or trade stocks in general. I think there's an easy solution that American people would support. Just put it in a blind trust or put it in an exchange fund. But the fact that members of Congress can own individual stocks and then make decisions that benefit those companies that then benefit their portfolio is outrageous.
Yeah, I remember that book, Throw Them All Out. That's a classic. Can you shed light on common methods by which members of Congress not only leverage their positions for financial gain, but get away with it, and what loopholes currently exist that allow these practices to continue?
Well, the fact is there's actually an index fund that I think patterns trades after what Nancy Pelosi purchases. There's a reason why I think Josh Hawley in the Senate has sponsored what's called the Pelosi Act, because Nancy Pelosi is famous for this. She'd get IPOs for Visa and then take action to benefit some of those companies. Steve Kroft from 60 Minutes actually asked her about this famously one time. Members of Congress can sit on committees where they're privy to information about industries, and they actually control legislation that will impact those industries. So they know what's coming, and then they can buy and sell stocks in those industries and they don't just buy individual companies, they actually do options trading. So it's very sophisticated financial maneuverings that people who are paid money to run the country are making money from it, and they're participating in, and it's completely wrong. Congress, unfortunately, is exempt from lots of different rules that you and I have to play by. So the penalties for insider trading is one of them, but they don't have to be subject to FOIA requests. They don't have to be subject to different HR policies. So it's crazy. It's multiple systems of justice, one for them and one for the rest of us.
So given the systemic, and this is clearly systemic, given the systemic nature of these issues, what reforms do you think are not just necessary to curb these self-serving behaviors among lawmakers, but realistically implementable?
Yeah, I think an outright ban on members of Congress from owning individual stocks is reasonable. You're there for public service, not personal profit, and too many people have forgotten that. As in 2020, we actually made a milestone, maybe not a great one, in fact, definitely not a great one, but for the first time starting in 2020, the median member of Congress's net worth was $1 million. So we now have a country run by a majority of people who are millionaires. And those people, when you get that much money, they're incentivized to continue to make it. And that's why, instances like Mikey Sherrill from New Jersey, I think is unfortunately much more common than it should be. So I think we should ban individual members of Congress from owning individual stocks. I think we should certainly ban them from trading stocks. And I think it's kind of one of those things where if Donald Trump really wanted to force the issue, a majority of Americans absolutely support the idea that members of Congress stop profiting off of public service.
Yeah, I think I heard Eric Swalwell just yesterday say the very same thing, that they should all be prohibited from owning stocks. It was after he was praising Nancy Pelosi as his mentor, and I think it was Charlemagne the God was like, yeah, she made a lot in insider trading, and he's like, okay, none of us should own stocks, okay? So your co-host Peter Schweitzer and my former colleague at Breitbart News asserted that the Biden family's financial dealings with foreign entities, particularly in Ukraine, amount to a, quote, capture of the Oval Office, citing evidence from Hunter Biden's laptop suggesting that the then Vice President Joe Biden took official actions benefiting Burisma, a Ukrainian energy company that employed his son, for those who have forgotten, because this is something that has been buried for the last few years was buried at the time by the Democrat media complex. They argue that this constitutes a direct quid pro quo, with Biden allegedly pressuring Ukraine to fire a prosecutor investigating Burisma in exchange for financial gain through his son's position. What is needed? What is the missing link to actually, bring the, or is it too late to?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And by the way, the common link between this story and the last one we were just discussing is, how come members of Congress are allowed to get away with so many blatant actions of self-enrichment? Because the Biden administration, the Biden presidency, was doing it for decades. So, and it's not like anybody, and they're all essentially business partners. They're all in on the same scam and scheme at the expense, honestly, of the American democratic system. So what's needed, unfortunately, I think that Joe Biden, by pardoning Hunter Biden, has removed from him the threat of criminal prosecution for any self-enrichment scheme he participated in with Burisma. Now, as Donald Trump has pointed out, the one person that Joe Biden did not pardon is himself. So if, Representative Comer or somebody from the Department of Justice wanted to look into this and potentially bring charges, I know we've actually talked about, this is a role for Pam Bondi to explore, then, Joe Biden could potentially be on the hook for this. I don't know that that would be a politically popular thing to do, especially in light of, just his current state of mental and emotional well-being. But I do think that there's a reason why they extended pardons for Hunter Biden for as long as they did. Remember this. Not only does the pardon period begin before Burisma starts paying Hunter Biden, but it extends all the way up through the time period where Joe Biden makes the decision, in my opinion, against his will, to step down from running for re-election. I believe there's a strong possibility that the Bidens entered into some negotiations about, like, what do they get for getting out of the race. And so any role that Hunter Biden or other Biden family members who also received pardons may have played in negotiating the terms of Joe Biden's exit would also be covered by the pardon that Joe Biden extended him.
Well, speaking of which, do you believe that the Burisma affair was an isolated incident, or was it part of a broader pattern of the Biden family monetizing his public office through foreign intermediaries?
Yeah, I absolutely do not believe it was an isolated incident. At the Government Accountability Institute, we've helped Peter Schweitzer write a number of books highlighting specifically that it's not an isolated incident. It's unfortunately part of a much larger and offensive pattern, quite frankly. Hunter Biden participates in a first of its kind $1.5 billion joint venture with the Chinese Communist Party. This is not somebody who had any history, professional or otherwise, in big finance, and yet somehow the Chinese Communist Party decides, no, Hunter Biden's the guy we want to do this deal with. He's doing business deals in the third world, the shadier parts of the global economic system. He's not doing business with Lloyd's of London. He's not doing business in Germany. He's doing business with, Russian mayors' wives, things like that. So I think, unfortunately, he did a lot, and then he kind of, after he leaves this world, then all of a sudden he's an art dealer, and there's no transparency, there's no disclosures there, and so who knows what kind of business the people who are buying his art had before the White House. No, it's incredibly suspect, and I welcome the continued efforts by Representative Comer and the House Oversight Committee to continue to investigate it.
Yeah, Eric Eggers, it's so important that we keep these topics afloat, even though they're years old. It's so important. There's still people that don't understand what happened, and so I think it's important that we keep talking talking about this every chance we get. So thank you so much for coming back on, and we look forward to having you on again and continuing this conversation, because it needs to continue. We need to continue having this conversation.
It absolutely needs to continue. That's what we do every week on our Drill Down podcast. And I so appreciate you and programs like this one for continuing to highlight these incredibly important issues. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Coming up, Ami Kozak joins us for Headline Roulette.